Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duck Bricks. I'm Chris, and after many years, we are finally getting an Iron Man 2 Final Battle themed set. This is Iron Man and War Machine versus Hammer Drones, and it's the first time the climax of Iron Man 2 has ever been featured in LEGO set form. It's an interesting small set. I certainly have my thoughts on the price and value of this build, but I do think as a small little item with Iron Man and War Machine and 2 drones, it's a pretty decent set all in all. So join me right now as we take a look at an early review of this set. This right here is one of our smallest LEGO Marvel sets all year. It's 76320 Iron Man and War Machine versus Hammer Drones. It retails for $23 US, 20 euros, and comes with 204 pieces. Why this was not $20, I don't really know, but it's close enough to $20 that I actually think that out of all the Marvel sets this year, the value is okay for this, especially if you count like the 2 minifigs and the 2 mechs as being like about $10 value for a minifig and a mech. I think that's about right, so it's about $20. Taking a look at this set in particular, it is relatively simple. It's just featuring the final battle from Iron Man 2, which we've actually never seen in LEGO form before, so it's pretty cool to actually finally get that very impactful scene in one of the early MCU movies depicted as a LEGO set. Personally, I'd love to see them go back and do some of the older movies. Like, I want to see a set based off of the first Avenger, which we technically still haven't gotten. Now, taking a look at the Hammer Drones themselves, I think the builds are alright. A lot of people, when the images first released, were not happy with these builds. They thought that they looked really awkward and they weren't fun, and honestly, I don't think I'm as negative as most people about these builds in particular, because obviously when you compare it to the movie, there's a lot of big differences, but as a playable toy, I actually kinda like how articulatable these are. You've got the hinge plate used for the knees, which is something that does make it a little bit hard to stand up, like it does tend to flop over a bit, so I don't know if I would have used a hinge plate for that, but overall I do think that does help with the aesthetics, and they do generally look at least like an approximation of what they looked like in that final battle. The 2 Hammer Drones are different. This one does have a spring-loaded missile, and the other one brings back the old flick-fire missiles, which we haven't seen for quite a long time. There was a period of time where almost every LEGO set would have a flick-fire missile, and I feel like that period kind of went away with the advent of stud shooters and spring-loaded missiles, but now they are back, and that's actually a pretty interesting touch. I think the aesthetics of the flick-fire missiles actually work very well in favor for this mech, but honestly, they're not the most interesting things, and they definitely do feel a little dated given what you have. Thankfully, it does come with an extra missile in case you lose one, which is interesting. Usually they don't include an extra brick-built missile, but altogether, there's not really that much else going on here. You can articulate the arms by swinging them on hinges and moving them up and down, which is limited articulation, but there's not really much you need to do with the arms, and the legs can just bend at the knee like so, and then you can have mimic a stomping motion. Of course, you can rotate the head, and they did introduce a brand new print for the 1x1 square tile on the head here, which I think works out pretty well, but altogether, honestly, I don't really have that much more to say about these sets in particular. I really do think that this is just your kind of simple standard battle pack for staging the final battle for Iron Man 2. Now, the big question here is this worth $23? And honestly, 20 would have been the perfect price for this set, for me in particular. It's really cool to get Iron Man and War Machine in a small set, especially because if you live in the US, you probably don't have these figures already unless you have some of the more expensive sets, whereas in Europe, some of them did come in magazines, so that's a little bit better, but for the US-based folks, it is good to get them in a relatively cheap set. I can see this being a pretty decent starter set for kids just getting into LEGO Marvel. You get basically 2 different Iron Man suits in the set itself, so I feel like I'm actually a lot more positive on this set than most people would be. The Iron Man suit included is the Mark 6, which is the version that he used throughout Iron Man 2. We saw this appear throughout the Marvel logo and the Hall of Armor from earlier this year, so there have been 2 larger sets that do include it, but it is nice to get it in a relatively cheap set, and of course you can open up the mask and showcase Tony Stark's face underneath with that holographic print. The new masks did take a little bit for me to get used to them, but honestly, they've been growing on me a little bit. I still have a lot of nostalgia for the old one, but I do appreciate how this one does allow you to have a bit more detail without having all the different pieces molded in. We get the War Machine Mark I suit, which was introduced actually in the Iron Man Armory from 2022, but it's appeared in a couple sets since. I do like this particular suit of armor. I think it is genuinely a really well-designed figure. The stud cannon on the back is very awkward to me. I definitely do wish it had the little more accurate version of the lightsaber holster there, but honestly, for a playable set, especially one meant for young kids to enjoy, it does make sense they did choose to go with the stud shooter for this version of the suit, especially because it is a lot more fun to play with it and actually have them be shooting missiles at each other. So altogether, this is a relatively small and inoffensive set. I don't really have that many negative points to say about it. 23 is like a little bit of a stretch, but it's not completely outrageous like a lot of the other sets in this wave, so I'm going to pick my battles and just say that, you know what, if you like this, if you don't have the minifigs already because they actually all came in more expensive sets, then maybe this is a good way to actually get them for relatively cheap, and it's a decent parts pack as well. That's all I have to say about this set, so let's move on to the next one.